Shabbat Shalom! Rabbi Zerin here, outside on the patio getting ready for Shabbat tonight, with a thought for Shabbat. This week we read Parashat Lech-Lecha, when we begin the story of Abraham and Sarah. We begin the parasha with God's call to Abraham, now known as Avram, when God says, Lech-Lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladtecha u'mibeit avicha, go forth from your homeland and your birthplace and your father's house to a land that I will show you. This jumpstarts Abraham and Sarah's journey to the land of Israel and their covenantal relationship with God, a relationship that continues on to us today. We take it for granted that this relationship would be with Abraham and Sarah, but surprisingly, the Torah itself does not specify why Abraham, of all people on the earth, would be the one to be chosen by God. Our rabbis, wondering this very question, offered several answers by way of midrash, including one midrash that I particularly appreciate, from Bereshit Rabbah, the collection of midrashim Genesis Rabbah. In this midrash, they offer a comparison. To what might this be similar? To a person who wanders from place to place until he encounters a palace ablaze, a bira achat doleket. The person says to himself, could it possibly be that this palace is ablaze without anyone to care for it? At that point in time, the master of the palace peeks out and says, I am the master of this palace, and I care for it. So too with Avram, who wandered from place to place around the world and said, could it possibly be that the world is ablaze with no one to care for it? And so God called forth and said, I am the master who cares for the world. And because Avram said this, God chose Avram and called to Avram and said, Lech-Lecha, go forth. What I appreciate so much about this midrash is the ambiguity of it, of this particular phrase, bira achat doleket, a particular palace ablaze. Because we could read this midrash as saying that the palace is ablaze, aglow from light coming from inside the windows. And so the person who sees it knows that there must be life inside the palace. Or we could read the midrash as saying that the palace is ablaze, burning up in flames, and there must be someone who can tend to it and care for it. Perhaps this ambiguity is intentional. And perhaps Avram thought both things as he wandered the earth. Perhaps he saw in the earth both beautiful light, the glow of life coming from our world. And at the same time, he saw the world ablaze. He saw chaos and a need to care and tend for the planet, a need to have someone to look after the world and all that is in it. And so maybe God chose Avram because Avram knew that someone, some being, some divine entity must be looking after the world. Or maybe God chose Avram because Avram recognized that the world is aglow with life and light, and simultaneously the world is in need of tending and care. And if we can continue to have that kind of relationship with the world, we will continue to be B'nai Avraham v'Sarah, the descendants of Abraham and Sarah, who continue this covenantal relationship with God until today. And with that, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.